Okay, so you've shared this really interesting interview transcript with us today. It's between an HR rep, Mr. Jagdeep Singh, and a job applicant, Shimalika Sharma.
Yeah, it's a great find. It really gives you this fly-on-the-wall perspective of a crucial conversation.
Exactly. And it seems useful for, well, pretty much anyone involved in hiring or looking for a job or even just curious about these kinds of professional chats.
Definitely. Whether you're a hiring manager wanting to, maybe refine your questions or a job seeker yourself, there's a lot to unpack here.
And this one feels particularly rich because Shimalika is, a recent MBA grad.
That's right, MBA in HR from Delhi University, applying for an HR role. So you get a good sense of what a well-prepared recent graduate sounds like. The detail's pretty impressive.
So the plan for this deep dive then is to really pull this conversation apart.
Right. We want to look at what makes for good interviewing on both sides, understand Shimalika's motivations, what she brings to the table.
And what both the candidate and the HR rep are actually looking for in that first kind of screening interview.
Exactly. So, where should we start? Maybe with Shimalika's introduction.
Yeah, let's do that. She comes out pretty strong, laying out her credentials right away.
She does. MBA in HR, Delhi University, undergrad in psychology, and that internship at Tata Consultancy Services, TCS, in HR analytics. It's a solid foundation.
It really is. And I liked how she didn't just list them. She immediately connected her psychology degree to why she's interested in HR.
That was smart. Talking about understanding human behavior in organizations, it makes it feel less like a random collection of qualifications and more like a deliberate path,
Yeah, she's building that narrative from the get-go, explaining the why.
Which is something candidates sometimes forget to do, I think. They list the what, but not the why.
Good point. And her reasons for picking HR felt genuine, too. It wasn't just, it seemed like a good job.
No, she talked about enjoying the interaction, the challenge of resolving conflict, wanting to shape company culture. It felt quite passionate, actually.
It did. It makes you think, okay, she's actually thought about this. She wants this field.
Precisely. So that's takeaway number one, maybe articulate your why.
Definitely. Okay, so what about that TCS internship? That sounded pretty substantial.
It really did. Analyzing exit interviews, employee feedback, using that data for predictive models on attrition.
Wow. And developing engagement surveys too. That's not just making copies, is it?
Not at all. That's real, practical application of HR principles and analytics. And she highlights the skills she gained, data interpretation, which is huge now.
And stakeholder communication, being able to explain that data to people who need to act on it.
Crucial skill. Absolutely crucial, especially in HR, where you're often translating data insights into people's strategies.
But she also mentioned it wasn't all smooth sailing.
Right, and that was actually a really strong point, I thought, admitting she faced challenges.
Like what? Unstructured data?
Yeah, dealing with messy data, needing to quickly get up to speed on tools like Excel and Power BI.
Okay, common challenges, but how does she say she handled them?
That's the key part. She didn't just say it was hard. She said she sought out mentorship, she took initiative to upskill herself. That shows problem solving.
And proactiveness. Resourcefulness,
Yeah.
Things you definitely want in an employee.
Exactly. It paints a much more realistic and, frankly, impressive picture than just listing achievements. It shows resilience.
Okay, good point. So moving from the internship, what about her strengths? How does she frame those?
She picked ones that are obviously relevant to HR, communication, empathy, adaptability.
Standard choices maybe, but did she back them up?
Well, she linked them directly. Communication for building rapport, empathy for understanding needs, adaptability for handling different situations. She also mentioned being analytical and a good listener.
Which connects back to that internship experience, right? The analytical side.
It does. It feels consistent. But what really stood out for me was when she talked about areas for improvement.
The weakness question, essentially. How did she handle that?
Really well, I thought. She mentioned public speaking, but then, crucially, she didn't just leave it there.
She said what she was doing about it.
Exactly. She specifically mentioned joining Toastmasters to actively work on it.
Oh, that's excellent. It's concrete, it shows self-awareness, and it shows initiative. Much better than a vague answer.
Totally. It transforms a potential negative into a positive, demonstrating that commitment to growth. That's gold for an employer.
Okay, so self-aware, proactive. What about what actually drives her? Her motivations.
This was interesting too. She talked about wanting a supportive environment, feeling like she's contributing something meaningful.
So less about just perks and more about the work itself.
Seems like it. Also, opportunities to learn, new challenges, and getting recognition, but specifically recognition for the impact she makes.
That's quite insightful. It suggests she's looking for intrinsic motivation, purpose, not just external rewards.
Right. Which, if you're a hiring manager, tells you a lot about how to potentially keep someone like her engaged long term. It's not just about the paycheck.
Very true. Culture and contribution matter.
And speaking of contribution and working with others, she had that great story about her MBA project.
Oh yeah, the conflict resolution example. Tell us about that again.
So the team was split, right? Some wanted a presentation focused purely on narrative storytelling. Others wanted it all data, very analytical.
Classic conflict. How did she handle it?
She stepped in as a mediator. She listened to both sides and then proposed a hybrid approach using a strong narrative structure, but backing it up with key data points.
Nice. So finding the common ground, integrating the best of both.
Exactly. It's a perfect little anecdote to demonstrate collaboration, problem solving, and those communication skills she mentioned earlier. It's tangible proof.
Much better than just saying, I'm a good team player. Show, don't just tell.
Precisely. Okay, so she's good at resolving conflict. What about her own future plans? Did she talk about aspirations?
She did. Quite clearly, actually. She mentioned wanting to be in an HR leadership role within about 5 years.
Ambitious. What else?
Contributing to more strategic things like talent management, DEI initiatives, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also mentoring others and just continuously learning.
So she's thinking long term, not just about the first job. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
It shows she's invested in her career path.
And potentially invested in staying with a company that supports that growth. It makes you think, how clearly do I articulate my own long-term goals?
Fair point. And her reasons for wanting this specific company, were they generic?
No, actually, they seem pretty well researched. She mentioned specific things like their employee-first policies, their focus on innovation, a transparent work culture, and how they invest in employee well-being and career development.
So she's clearly done her homework. She didn't just say, you're a great company. She pointed to specific attributes that appealed to her.
Right. Shows genuine interest, not just firing off applications.
Definitely. And what about the actual role? Did she have preferences?
Yeah, she mentioned leaning towards employee engagement or learning and development initially, which kind of fits with her psychology background and motivation, right?
Makes sense. But was she rigid about it?
No, not at all. She explicitly said she was open to other areas like talent acquisition or HR operations, wanting to get that holistic view of HR.
That's smart. Flexibility, especially early on, is a big plus.
Yeah.
Willingness to learn different facets of the function.
Shows a growth mindset again, doesn't it? Okay, what about handling pressure? Always a classic interview topic.
Yep, and her approach sounded very sensible. Organization, breaking down big tasks, prioritizing.
Standard stuff, maybe.
Well, yeah, but she also added, knowing when to ask for help or delegate if needed. That shows maturity.
True. Not trying to be a hero and crash.
Exactly. And she backed it up with another example from her internship.
The late night presentation.
That's the one. Last minute request, team had to pull together, work through the night. It showcased performing under pressure, sure, but also teamwork.
Right. It wasn't just about her. It was about how the team collaborated to get it done. Makes you reflect on your own pressure coping mechanisms, huh?
For sure. It really grounds the skills in reality. Okay, so that covers a lot of what she said. But then she turned the tables, right? She asked questions.
Yes. And they were good questions, I thought. Not just, what are the next steps?
What did she ask about?
Things like the onboarding process. She wanted specifics found out about a 2-week structured program and a buddy system.
Okay, practical stuff.
Yeah.
Shows she's thinking about hitting the ground running.
Exactly. And she asked about performance evaluation, especially for new joiners. The answer mentioned quarterly check-ins focused on learning and adapting.
Again, smart. Understanding how success is measured and how development is supported. These show she's serious and thinking ahead.
For sure. And then her final question was more personal.
Oh yeah, what was that?
She asked Mr. Singh, the HR rep, what he personally enjoyed about working there.
Ooh, nice touch. Gets beyond the corporate spiel. How did he respond?
Positively. He talked about autonomy, trust, having collaborative colleagues, opportunities for growth. It sounded genuine.
And that kind of answer gives a candidate a real feel for the culture, doesn't it? Much more than a mission statement sometimes.
Totally. It provides that insider glimpse.
Okay, so we've focused a lot on Shimalika, which makes sense from the transcript. But what about Mr. Singh's side? What can we infer about his perspective or approach?
Well, he clearly guided the conversation well. He asked open-ended questions, probed into her experiences, especially the internship challenges.
He seemed focused on understanding her thought process, not just getting stock answers.
Right. And you get the sense he was listening for certain underlying qualities.
Like what? What seemed important to him?
Things like learning agility, her ability to pick up new things quickly, like the software, teamwork, obviously, accountability.
And that commitment to self-improvement she showed.
Yeah, definitely that too. While he didn't have a checklist out loud, his questions steered towards understanding those competencies.
And his own positive comments about the company culture in response to her question.
Served a dual purpose, right? Answered her question honestly, but also subtly reinforced why it's a good place to work. Kind of selling the company too.
Fair enough. It's a two-way street after all. Okay, so wrapping this all up, if we boil it down, what are the main takeaways from this deep dive for you?
For me, the big one is the power of that personal narrative. Shimalika didn't just list facts, she wove them into a coherent story about why she's right for HR in this company.
Couldn't agree more. And using specific examples, especially from that internship, to prove her skills rather than just claim them, that was crucial. Achievements, learnings, not just duties.
Definitely. Also, the self-awareness piece, being honest about areas for growth, but showing you're actively working on them, that's very compelling.
Yep. And finally, the questions she asked, they showed real engagement and forward thinking. It demonstrated she wasn't just passively being interviewed.
It really shifted the dynamic. So for hiring managers listening, maybe the takeaway is to create space for those narratives and probe for those deeper qualities.
I think so. Ask questions that get beyond the resume, understand the how and why behind their experiences, look for that self-awareness and learning mindset.
And for the job seekers out there listening, this is almost like a blueprint, isn't it?
It really is. It shows what good preparation looks like, how to connect your experiences, the importance of demonstrating genuine interest and asking smart questions. It's about showing you're a good fit, not just qualified on paper.
So maybe a final thought for everyone listening to mull over.
Go for it.
How clearly does your own professional story come across? If you were in Shimalika's shoes, what parts of your narrative would shine and what might need a bit more articulation?
Ooh, good question. And maybe what aha moments did looking at this interview spark for you about how these conversations really work? Something definitely worth reflecting on.